Hello, welcome to Framework and our Bioware Omnibus. I am Al Schwartz. With me, as always, is John Bernard.
I'm John. Hey, what's up?
Yes. Well, we're returning to Mass Effect now. We left off last time, sort of right when you get to your big promotion, you get given your spaceship, and the galaxy opens up to you for exploration. You get to kind of now we're in the choose your own adventure portion. After the opening act was more on rails.
If you have not listened to our first episode on Mass Effect, you should if you want to listen to this one, probably. Unless you know Mass Effect so well that you're like, I'm not interested in hearing about the Citadel or Eden Prime. I'm curious about Novaria. If that's you, then you're okay. Otherwise, probably want to start at the beginning.
That type of person has all kinds of time, though. They're on their 9th playthrough of this. I mean, this is the shortest of the 3 games.
Oh, yeah. You can wrap this up in like 35 hours, maybe? Something like that.
But, well, is that... You're talking like... I mean, I think if you sprinted through the plot line... And, ignored all the side quests, you could probably do it in under 20, I would guess.
I'm not talking speed runs, but...
right.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you're playing this game, very few people are just like, I got to get through it as quick as possible. That's not the vibe for Mass Effect or RPGs. I don't know. I feel like everyone I know who plays RPGs, I was like, well, I have to do everything. It's going to take me as long as it takes me. And that's just sort of what you walk into a Bioware game looking for.
Yeah. I mean, that's not unique to Bioware games. It feels like that's what Elder Scrolls is like too, although it's to the detriment of people's lives and how much more like just random collection quests there are.
There were Elden Scroll days where I would spend hours just crafting. I would be like, well, I'm gonna get really good at crafting. I'm gonna make go grab a bunch of different pieces of armor and then smelt them all down. It's gonna be a whole thing. I look up like 4 hours later. I've been spending on this difficult, irritating carrying weight system and crafting system and just trying to maximize my profits from that. And I'm just like, this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be fun. And I've turned it into something else. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big sucker for anything like that in these games.
Yeah, me too. And I think that we're not the exceptions to that rule. So that's one of the things about this though. Every Mass Effect game has an exploration aspect to it where you can just gather, various widgets and doodads because there's 13 of them scattered around the galaxy, and you can. Oh yeah, I don't even know what happens if you get on any of them. There's no
writings of Matriarch Dilanaga, of course.
Yeah, right. Or Turian insignias, or whatever. I have no idea what the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow is if I get it. You have to play through this game multiple times.
There is a third game appearance of like if you do get every of the writings of Matriarch Dilanaga, there is payoff in the third game.
I vaguely remember that being the case. But even going into a playthrough, being like, okay, I'm not going to waste as much time this time. We're doing this show about it. I'm just trying. We're not going to focus on the writings of Matriarch Dilanaga, although obviously we found ourselves doing so. But I'm really trying to get through this plotline as fast as possible, more or less. But I still get sucked into the gameplay of I can't leave treasure chests unopened. I can't. That's not in my DNA to be able to do that, which is why I guess I have to be careful about what games I buy and why I can't do Elder Scrolls type stuff.
Increasingly, as we are adults, yes, it's become a very, very real thing. I can't play all the games anymore. Not even close. Probably can't play all the games I have.
And maybe this is a thing to just plant a flag on for future Mass Effect games. But I feel like there's almost a detriment thing to it, is that it feels like some of these Bioware games have put considerable effort into building out like different outcomes, different endings and whatnot for different types of playthroughs. And a lot of them are dependent on, it's like, to get the best, it's built around the basic idea that to get the best ending, quote unquote, you have to do all the stuff in the game. You do all the completionist stuff. You complete every side quest, and then it opens up some alternate ending that, whatever is the better one. And I find like it's almost difficult for me to access a lot of this content. I want to do, because like my approach to Mass Effect is that it's like playing through a movie. Yeah. And I want to kind of experiment with a messier version of Mass Effect where, the suicide mission does not go off without a hitch. And there's, strife and drama and fuck ups we have to work through. But
Yeah.
that kind of requires me to skip content to get the worst outcomes. Worse but more dramatic. And I don't know that at least as far as this trilogy goes, which ended 10 years ago, they hadn't ironed out any way to sort of get around that I'm aware of.
It's tough. It's I think what I want in playing this game over and over and wanting to see different versions of it and wanting to see the streamlined version and how that affects I've gotten too knowledgeable about how the time works in the game, and there's not a clicking bomb or not a clicking bomb, ticking clock. There's not a ticking clock because I know what the marks are before. Like, I got to have this done before this happens. Otherwise I'll lose my chance. And I'm just too conscious of that. I have to consciously make the decision to move things forward before I'm done or before I'm ready. So somebody will die. And that doesn't feel like, that's not organic either. It doesn't actually feel like kind of edge of your seat pacing. It's just sort of, well, what if I break the game in this way, and that can be interesting, but yeah, there's not a lot of urgency to do things fast or pay out to skipping stuff. You just miss things, and that's because the game is old. It's just that's a level of sophistication that we had not hit yet. I don't know if we've hit it yet, but I'd say getting closer.
We're leaving in like the next episode we do about Mass Effect 1, the final one. We'll get to, there's sort of a point in this game where you can, there's a party member that can live or die based on what you do. Yeah. And I want to I have to really commit and focus myself to kill off that party member if I want to, just because it's difficult. The options there for me, but it feels like I'm just closing off extra content with this character if I lose them too early. But also, I don't know. By the time you get to the end, Mass Effect 3, if every single character lived through everything you did, then it feels like, this adventure was kind of a lark. And maybe the Sturm and Drang and the apocalyptic tone of that doesn't land as hard if we haven't lost anybody along the way.
There's an appeal to that. But it is also, it's stage managed, it's like, okay, if this character is going to die, it's because I made the choice that I want to see what happens if this character dies. And I don't know how you get around that when you're playing the game over and over again, Now, granted, there's some stuff, even in this last playthrough of 2, I lost somebody on the suicide mission because I made a wrong choice at one point. And I was like, I should have known better. Oh, well. And then I didn't have that character in the third game. So, it exists. It's there. If I were taking it super serious, I probably would have been able to avoid that, though. And,
Yeah. Well, and certainly the first time through, I'm just trying to do, there's that thing, right. There's a tension, I guess, between crafting a narrative that is, the most, fulfills the most dramatic potential, and then the old gamer instinct of just, quote unquote, beating the game.
Right. Right. They're at odds in games like this as often as not. And that's interesting.
That just some of those routes are sort of coded like failure states, even though the game, they put all this effort into making sure you can play right through that. And it doesn't end the game. But it's just hard to rewire your gamer brain around that, I find.
If you kill everyone in the suicide mission or almost everyone, the third game is basically just unrecognizable and weird and broken. It's a lot shorter. There's a lot of new characters filling in roles that the old characters were supposed to. It is a noticeably worse experience. They are trying to make it work, basically, but it's not what they intend you to do.
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to, I mean, it's a little on the clumsy side, but from what I recall, it's noticeable. The Mass Effect 3 is sort of built around every side mission is just checking in with one of your old classmates.
Very much.
And if you get a bunch of people killed, then there's just a lot of you see the movie Beer Fest?
Well, of course. Sure. Yes.
Yeah, sure. And they have their friend Landfill dies tragically partway through, and they all mourn him for one scene. And then his twin brother shows up and says, "Hey, my name's Gil. And actually, my twin brothers told me all about you. And, in his honor, you could just call me Phil." And
That is one of my favorite jokes in any movie. Really, that's not a great film, but that is a great bit.
It's got some isolated gags that are great, and that's one of them. But there's the Mass Effect 3 side missions are kind of like that. It's like,
yes,
okay, you're clearly where Grunt would be standing if I had not gotten him killed, and you're, yeah.
All right, we're far ahead though. We're ahead of ourselves. We're here to talk about the middle of Mass Effect 1 today.
We got started talking about matriarchs writings, and it gets you off on these tangents. So let's circle back to that exploration aspect of this, because this is sort of. I love this stuff. And there is a tension here too between how the overarching plot that we talked about and the apocalyptic stakes there, and how there is ostensibly a ticking clock there, that the whole galaxy is at risk, and yet a lot of the pleasures of this game are in just sort of tooling around your spaceship and landing on random planets to drive around in your tank, which is not something Commander Shepard should be doing by any stretch of the imagination, given what the story says.
Well, I mean, this is before the threat is revealed. It's still sort of nebulous in most of the first game. It's like, there's a rogue Spectre. Oh, we got to go get him. Okay.
But they established that Shepard is concerned about the Reapers, and they haven't fully established that that's definitely coming, and it's coming like within X number of days or whatever. But that is the threat Shepard is concerned about and is trying to convince other people is real. And look, when it comes to this exploration stuff, I said, I think this has been smoothed out quite a bit for the Legendary Edition that I'm playing, but there was a lot of complaints about the Mako in the original edition, the truck that you drive around in on the planets when you land. And that really can get quite tedious when you have the, compulsion, as I do, to chase down every marker on the mini map in that thing. Yes. Some of them are kind of difficult to get to, and not in like a fun platforming puzzle kind of way. It's just kind of a grind to drive slowly up a sheer cliff face in your ATV truck.
This is a big problem for me. I am one of the anti-Mako contingent for sure. I can't stand this shit. And it is specifically the exploration aspect of it. I don't mind the idea of exploration in a video game, but sometimes, and Mass Effect 1 very much falls into this, when the rubber meets the road, it is the worst thing in the world for me to do. I am so frustrated because I am OCD and I have to go to every planet and check every planet. Turns out all the planets are pretty much the same in Mass Effect 1, and it is the same like cliffside that you have to maneuver a vehicle up, and you're just like, oh no, it doesn't work. I'm falling down. God damn it. And I'll try again on a less severe incline. And so I got to roll around the side to do that. It is hours of time doing this stuff. And it represents for me the nadir of the Mass Effect experience.
Yes. Gameplay wise, I see that. I don't mind some of the stuff of when you're actually fighting in the Mako, like shooting your big cannon.
That's better.
It's better. The Thresher Maws are a bit tedious, especially the giants, like not sandworms because they're on a non-sand planets, but they're basically sandworms that pop up from time to time. On the hardest difficulty, which I am also compelled to play, like I'd say they're probably a third too much health. That just takes a little too long. And what you're not in a great deal of threat from them, at least. I mean, they killed me a lot in the original, but it seems like they strengthened up the Mako and Legendary, perhaps, because none of them ever killed me. But sometimes I have to drive in circles around them for too long. That's my only gripe there. But I don't mind shooting it up with the Geth or the pirates when I come across them. And like I said, driving around in the Mako and trying to drive up cliffs, that's the problem.
Any open world game suffers from this somewhat. Like even the Elder Scrolls game we were talking about. Like if you find yourself with I got to hoof it around the mountain, fuck, then you're in for it for 20 minutes. It's just problem with exploration. Yeah, some people love it. I can't. Sure. I can't. Yeah.
But in terms of exploration, one thing if I don't like driving the Mako around all the time, I do really like navigating the galaxy map. I love that. The Galaxy Map theme song, obviously. And it's just the way it's obvious that all the planets and star systems, like the descriptions of them and everything, were crafted by a genuine nerd for astronomy. that
Yeah.
there's probably 15 systems you can go to, and they all have like a description of what makes their star system unique. And this one's a blue dwarf, and this one's a red dwarf, and this one's a binary system. And this world, like the world design, I think is really actually nice. Like you said, yeah, they're kind of, when Wonderful. You get down to the nuts and bolts of it, they're all the same, but some of them have constant meteor showers because the description says that this is currently in the long debris tail of some giant comet that passes by once every 1,000 years. And the ones that are in binary systems, when you look up in the sky, you can see 2 different colored stars in the sky. When you're on Earth's moon, you can see the Earth up in the sky instead of the sun. And that is like the loving design of the worlds is nice. And then the level design is where it falls short, because sure, there's an in-universe explanation for why, like, you know, colony, deep space colonization and deep space, like spaceships, are all modular in their design. So every time, whatever distant and obscure planet you go to, it's got the same shaped building in it and the same layout inside.
That's a bummer every time. Yeah. The side quests, I guess you would say, in Mass Effect 1, they're not good. They're very repetitive. You have, like, it pretty much comes down to, like, well, there's this dual level storage facility on this planet. You will find it. There'll be pirates inside. You will shoot, I don't know, 8 pirates. And, you'll find some, new ammo type or something like that in there. You already have plenty of ammo types you don't use. Just something for the still not very good inventory system of the first Mass Effect, and then on to the next one. There is some recorded dialogue for them. I seem to remember one with you're chasing down a cult or trying to assess the threat of a cult. That's pretty okay. There's some Rachni testing things that are kind of interesting, but for the most part, it's 8 pirates.
Yeah, or occasionally Geth as the alternate to the pirates, but they're sort of like set up in similar bases, it feels like. There's like sort of, there's the 2-floor one, and then there's the like round building research station that is just 1 floor but has 2 areas you fight through. And you go through a lot of those. Yeah. The level design is not great.
It's repetitive is the problem. If it were just, if they varied it up a little, that would help a lot.
And so the one like side mission that I think is pretty good is the Bring Down the Sky DLC side mission that gives you different shaped levels and a little more of that recorded dialogue. It's odd. Like Mass Effect 1 does feel from a different time because of how there might be some recorded dialogue in those side missions, but they all kind of end with like a text box popping up and describing, like doing a dungeon master description of, as you shut down the last node of this VI, or this blah, blah, blah. Like, it's actually pretty well written stuff almost all the time, but it just feels a little odd that the cinematic element drops away in those instances consistently.
I mean, this game really feels its age, when you especially, they fixed it up for the Legendary Edition, and that's nice. It helps it. It's better than playing it as it originally was, as it came out. But right up against the next 2 games, there's a lot of little quality of life control things and stuff like that, it's just not there, and and
it looks a lot better than a 2007 game should with that remaster.
It does, and it always looked good for,
it doesn't look top of the line for 23, but
no. This game always kind of hit above its weight, in that regard, even at the time they came out, obviously, 15 years down the road or whatever, it's going to be dated, but it's always a good looking franchise for its time. No question about that. Just, there were shortcuts that they took back then, or things that they weren't able to do. Things that they weren't able to fully realize that they eventually show up. But in this first game, you are limited. I think it becomes a lot of repetitive moments, and I think those tend to hide under the guise of exploration sometimes.
They certainly do. I'd say that yes, the side quests of this are a weak point, like you said. And a lot of that, like you said, is the repetitive environments, but I think that catches a little too much flack, or at least it obscures what some of the real problem for me is with the the combat in this game. Because for as much as those modular layouts are repetitive, like that could be okay if there was a greater enemy variety, and if the enemies also get kind of tedious to fight. The bigger problem I have with the combat in this game, which can be very good at times, but especially when you're doing those charge into a building, like storm a building missions, which there are a lot. It's the camera and the enemy movements are odd. Like the enemies do a lot of strafing, which makes them look kind of goofy when you see them across the room and they're sort of dancing in this figure eight do-si-do pattern a lot.
The AI is limited too. It's old. It's old AI.
Sure.
They
didn't fix that up for the Legendary Edition.
No,
it makes them like genuinely hard to hit. But it also the camera not being great means you have just horrible peripheral vision in this, and so I spend a lot of the times if an enemy got next to me or behind me and then they're just dancing around erratically, it became like really hard to like recenter them ever, even when they're right next to your face. So the upshot of that is that it becomes like perversely more difficult to hit the enemies the closer they are to you, even when you're using like a close-up, weapon like a shotgun. And since the problem with the higher difficulty I mentioned last time is that the enemies have like 1 billion health, and they can take like more than a full clip being emptied into them to actually knock down one enemy. It makes it so charge directly at Shepard and wave my gun wildly at him from 3 feet away is this like frustratingly effective strategy. Even when I'm sort of specialized for close combat, it just is. Mm-hmm. They dance they float like a butterfly. They're too much, and I can't
when
turn
it's a Krogan,
fast.
That's appropriate. That's the Krogan attack plan is
the charging in,
yes, big freckles. Yeah,
the figure eight dancing is not so much. So.
Fair enough. It's. I mean, everything about this game is just sort of like, they got better at it later, I guess. Not really the narrative or the dialogue branches. That stuff's all next level and amazing right away. But like, a lot of the nuts and bolts video game stuff is not quite there. And I mean, this is the first like real time combat game that Bioware did, right? This is, I guess sure. Jade Empire kind of. It's.
Yes, Jade Empire was, but it was not a shooter. It was a beat 'em up.
No,
and it feels like this is more ambitious in that. Jade Empire is pretty ambitious, even though it didn't really succeed in all its ambitions. But this, it's trying to be a combination of a real time shooter with 4 distinct weapons that you can toggle through at any time for all your characters, and
magic powers.
Special magic powers
and buffs and debuffs, all that stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And to have it be pausable and sort of do some turn-based direction of your crew to like use their special powers in this way at this time. And that's really ambitious to bite off. It actually succeeds pretty well for 2007 overall.
Yeah.
I'd say that the enemy design and AI is where it suffers, I would say. I wish there was as much variety in enemy designs and powers as there are in like our weapons and abilities.
For sure. And I mean, that's kind of a problem for the whole series. There's basically like 3 enemy types, except for special circumstances. And they're in world, it makes some sense, but still, you're just like, oh, more Cerberus guys, and it's anyway, not to get off on that. The thing is like, when do cover shooters become a thing? Like, this has got to be among the first, right? I don't think this is the first cover shooter, but it's a relatively new style of action game, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And by that, I mean ones where you can take cover, you have aiming mechanisms and the enemy also takes cover and you're maneuvering around a 3D world to find locations that make you better situated to shoot at them than they are at you. That's Gears of War, I guess, is the big one. That's the big cover
2006.
shooter game. That's okay. So like it's coming right after that a little, and it's probably not quite at that level. I guess that's the big innovation. And yeah,
obviously this is doing a lot of things that Gears of War did not do. But I guess that's the other knock on this is that even in its more polished remastered form, this is a cover-based shooting system that is not good at the cover part of things. It's not It's not good at snapping you into cover when you get close to something. Your
Right.
allies will constantly block you at the corner you're trying to look around. And look, we're doing a lot of complaining, making it sound like this game is pretty shitty. The stuff is not that bad. There's a lot going on, and sometimes it works very smoothly. There are parts where it just sort of hitches.
I got so good at this game and played it so much that none of this was really an issue for me. I was having no problem with the cover mechanics or anything. In the last like 4 or 5 times I've played this, I'm so familiar with it. It's something that I can just sort of, if we're talking about this from a macro perspective, I can be like, well, it's not exceptional fighting. It's not the finest ever. And I think it does actually become really good as the games go on. It's just this first one is, it's a first stab at something. And I think I don't know if perfected is the word, but I don't know. I don't know if I've ever been as good at a video game as I am at the latter Mass Effect combat. I played it a lot and I got real good at it. So I clearly gravitated towards it and enjoyed it a lot, to get there.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the shooting gets much better in Mass Effect 2 and even better in Mass Effect 3, I think, from what I recall. Yeah. And from what I also, from recollection, now 10 years old pretty much, but the enemy variety gets a lot better in Mass Effect 2 and then gets worse again in Mass Effect 3. But
kind of, yeah.
in this one, I find, that snipers, rifles, and pistols work pretty well. And that level of combat works pretty well. And so I got pretty good at that. I have not been able to get close combat to work, as I was sort of griping about earlier. It's just something about the enemies move too fast. Their hitboxes are too small. You're too slow to react. It is somehow much harder to target and hit somebody who's 2 steps away from me when I'm using a shotgun than it is to hit somebody who's 500 yards away in game terms with a sniper rifle. And I don't feel like that's
on the high difficulty part too, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that means that you can't really use the shotgun in the way it's intended, which is just to mow people down, is to get up in their face and just take them down. They got too much hit points to take. They can take the shotgun blast and they're not down, which is an issue with veteran.
It kind of makes the whole thing, not work.
Yeah. So you just don't use shotguns currently. Yeah, right. It's you end up being like, okay, well, I'm relying on pistols and sniper rifles, and I find that like when you put in the harder difficulties, Vanguard, which is like one of the most fun classes, stops being much fun because
that's
it's
what I did for my my Renegade. He's a shotgun specialist, except he used a pistol most of the time because
I mean it's a problem for the balance of the game. Unfortunately, it is. Fortunately, you got Infiltrator there, which is the most fun thing to do anyway, I think. So,
that is for my Paragon playthrough. I'm doing just a soldier, and the sniper rifle it's an old friend. I just get to use that.
The best sniper rifle in gaming. Sometimes I think I love the sniper in Mass Effect. Got so good.
Well, there's so many
sniping in other games. Yeah, man. When you get the superpower ones later, it's just. It's just a delight, a pure pleasure to snipe.
But maybe that gets us into the inventory system, which we griped about last time a bit. Really, they just throw way too much gear at you in this. And, it's not all useless, but a lot of it is going to be because there's just too goddamn much of it. And you can do quite a bit of customization with your, weapon add-ons and your armor add-ons. Not like fine crafting systems like Elder Scrolls that you're talking about, where you're making bespoke modifications for your different guns, but you can swap in, poison rounds versus rounds that bypass shields versus my favorite thing to do is with the sniper rifle, do the high explosive rounds, which basically means that you shoot explosives and makes your gun overheat in like one shot, basically. Yeah. But sniper rifles don't have a good rate of fire anyway. So you throw that on there with every other mod that increases damage and lowers your heat thing. It's like, okay, fine. I'll shoot one at a time and it'll overheat every time, but I'll shoot a sniper rocket across the field and it can be pretty effective that way.
That's fun. Yeah.
But the inventory system is not fun is the problem. You have to spend a lot of time junking things or selling them. And it's much, much more refined in the future, but this one, it's not it becomes very tedious in the second half of the game, especially where you're just running up. You're getting like, even if you're not really trying to manage it much, you're just getting constant reminders of you're almost to your item limit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the thing. Like this game, I think as the beginning of a trilogy where we know, that it's part 1 of 3 and we know what happens and we know that this is how this is setting the groundwork for what comes. This game works totally fine. It's all good. In the final estimation, it all works out. And by the end of this game, by Act 3 of Mass Effect, the original, I think I'm pretty much totally on board with what they're doing. I would say the middle of this game, the middle chunk of Mass Effect, I'm kind of just like, I think this is flailing a bit. The stories are good. The story missions, there's 2 big ones. They're pretty good. But all these side quests, all this inventory issues, all this middling kind of combat, kind of like a lot of things to do and not a lot of urgency to do them. A lot of repetitive exploration scenes. The Mako, I'm just sort of like, you know what? I don't think they hit this. I don't think I don't love this game, and I kind of get there in the end because the last third is incredible, but like the middle of this game is yeah. I mean, I said the nadir earlier. I think that's about right for most of what's going on in the center here. Well, we're going to talk about Noveria and the Thorian and all those, and those are cool, but they are writing triumphs more than anything. The writing is always good, but the mechanics of this thing, it's still finding itself.
There's probably a few people listening that hear you talk about the nadir of the series and are just
they want to talk about the end of 3.
They're gnashing their teeth about the very end of Mass Effect 3, and we'll get there sometime in 2028 or whatever. Yeah. But
sorry, I should have thought.
I'm sure you do. No, the gameplay of this, this is where it's at its least refined, and that's what we've been going over. I guess there's one other element of it's sort of gameplay and sort of story related that is less refined in this. And that's the whole Paragon Renegade dynamic. The morality system.
Uh-huh.
And this is sort of a carryover from earlier games from, Knights of the Old Republic, where having a light side, dark side meter kind of made perfect sense for that game.
Perfect binary choice then. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And here, because one, this is a tighter narrative, despite all this flabbiness of the middle section we're talking about today. And Shepard is a much more authored character than you get in Jade Empire or Knights of the Old Republic. That you can't take Shepard that far off the path. You can't be a totally evil person. And you certainly can't say, well, I don't care about Sarah and I want to go do something else.
You can't change the plot. The plot is you save the galaxy, like that's the thing.
Yes.
You can be an asshole in the way you save the galaxy is the variant. You can't destroy the galaxy though.
And so a lot of that time when you're playing there's the good side or the bad side, you can do blue or red, and playing it all the way blue and all the way red do lead to very similar outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Down to the point of, you would even think for some of these side missions, that the renegade path would be shooting your way through, and the Paragon path would be talking it out, like, diplomacy to get that biotic cult leader to stand down. But actually, if you gather up enough points on your side, it opens up these extra dialogue options. And even the renegade dialogue options is just threatening them into not fighting. And the Paragon option is, talking gently to them into not fighting. But in both cases, you're like, even in the Renegade case, you're not shooting your way through. You're actually just bypassing it in the exact same way, but with a different dialogue, cinematic. And that's also fine. I'm not trying to say that's, hence this is all bullshit. But
I know what you mean.
I think the problem is they've carried over from Knights of the Old Republic or whatever, that there's still the meter system and there's still gameplay sort of incentives to max out all red responses or all blue responses.
Yep.
Because that opens up options for you. You get discounts at stores if you're all blue, or that you get more money when you sell things if you're all red. And that's sort of reciprocal, but you can see the dialogue options that would be available to you if you were higher on certain metrics grayed out there. And that just further incentivizes you
right
to kind of forget about role playing and just max out in one direction.
Yeah, and to no benefit. This is another area that this game is dated, and it didn't seem, at the time. Obviously, these are the things you get. It's a video game, so you can be good or bad. You have a dialogue choice for good or for bad, and it is that thing that you joke about with these of games of this era where you have a choice to save the orphanage or burn it down with everyone inside. And that's your dichotomy, which is even weirder here because you can't actually be evil. So when you have these evil options,
I think that's the issue with the other Bioware games. Mm-hmm. Here it is. There's not the burn down the orphanage option really, because Shepard doesn't move that far. It's just sort of like, I don't know. It's okay. Here's a bad guy. Are you going to say to him, don't be stupid, surrender, and nobody has to die here before he pulls his gun? You shoot him anyway, or are you going to give him some sort of Snake Plissken one-liner and pull out your gun first before you shoot him to death. Like, it ends up in the exact same place a lot of the times, and that's part of having a Shepard that is an actual character. When we talk about the adaptations of these things, one of the things that I've realized I brought up a couple of times already is one of the first threshold questions when we're talking about how would you adapt a Bioware game to a screen? It's, do you even need the main character? Or could you remove the main character and just have the supporting cast carry this through, because they have to do a lot of the plot lifting anyway?
You 100%
Mass Effect is one where, you got to do it. I mean, Shepard is a character in this, and because there's big upsides to that. Like that you develop meaningful relationships with those characters in ways that and relationships that feel real. Like, Garrus really does have this, relationship with Shepard that feels lived in a way, because you hear these actors speaking to each other in a way that even like Dragon Age, when you have the silent protagonist, there's just I don't know. I have this mental image of just a party companion. You pick a thing and then their response is like, "Wow, you really mean that, don't you?" And it's like sort of like this, the way the writing has to like give the actors like the ability to play off blankness.
Right.
And have them sell. They need to sell your line to them, and then their next line. And Mass Effect doesn't have to do that because it's fully voice acted on both sides, and Shepard is a real presence in those dialogue scenes.
I mean, we talked about this last time we talked about Mass Effect, is the ownership that people have of their Shepard. Like, it really feels like you're Shepard. Even if you have 6 or 8 or 9 Shepards, you like, it's just the amount of time you spend with this person, even if ends up being a generic run through with no particular, I mean, like the last one I did, it was just sort of I wasn't really going for anything specific. I was just kind of like, well, we'll just see how the choices come to me. And it still feels specific. Maybe the biggest magic trick of the whole series, because you can kind of see the seams. You can see how they pulled this off in a lot of ways, but the magic still works. And that's tough. That's really hard to do. And I'm still many times through not entirely sure why it works the way it does. And I think maybe the voice acting, maybe it really is as simple as just you connect with these 2 different actors playing Shepard. I mean, I think Jennifer Hale is given credit for being, the better of the 2, but the guy's good too. The guy is really good.
Yeah.
So I think it, like that might be the number one thing that this first game is doing right. Well, the writing.
Hale's better, but the guy is really good too, actually. And we'll circle back to this probably in the next one, where I think that's the time to talk about video game romances more.
Sure, yeah.
And I think there's some interesting stuff going on there. But I do want to say too, like, yes, we, having played through this a half dozen times now, can see all the seams and the rails. We've explored the edges enough to figure out where the limits are and know what the mechanics are.
Yeah.
But all this is not, and like I said, a lot of the Paragon options, the Renegade options turn out in the same place. None of that means actually that there are not significant decisions to be made in this game. It's just that they don't line up with the alignment system.
Absolutely.
Very cleanly. But you can have different characters live and die throughout this game, and humanity be in a fairly different position. It gets ironed out quite to a very similar position by Mass Effect 2, I guess. But you can have very different things. Like the ending cinematic is going to be pretty much the same regardless of those decisions. So if that's your metric, then yes, none of it matters in terms of getting a different final cutscene. But who's alive and who's dead and what the relationships of shepherds are, those to me are very significant deviations between these things, whether the Rachnites live or die.
Well, that's the stuff. Like the Rachni thing, that's I think it's coded good or bad, but like it's not really like that's not right. a good or bad choice. There's things on both sides of the equation there that you have to actually think about. We should talk about those things because those represent really good role playing opportunities, really good sort of moral quandaries to think about and play with within the story to make the story your own. And the morality system feels like this vestigial thing that doesn't really matter in those regards. Like, I guess if you choose one or the other, you get points on one side, but it seems arbitrary and wrong, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can ignore it, fortunately. It's not that
you can, but it's weird to have that prominent of a system built into your game that the player is also better off kind of ignoring.
Yeah.
That's just odd. Mm-hmm. Sort of like some of the exploration stuff. I mean, like I said, I like a lot of that exploration stuff.
Can't not do it. Yeah.
Particularly, you mentioned last time that the one that you read all the codices. The codices.
I do.
Mistake. Mm-hmm. But not the planet descriptions. Whereas I'm the exact opposite. Some of the planet descriptions have great stuff, by the way.
I know. I've read plenty of them, but I can't do I can't just go read all the goddamn planet descriptions.
They're so much shorter than the codices. And there's a few that are cool. What it talks about the finding the Leviathan of Dis, which is some sort of genetically engineered living starship that's almost 1 billion years old that the Batarians found on this planet in Squidway. I think that ends up being related to the DLC called Leviathan, but I don't even remember at this point what all that is about. It's just cool world building. The one that there's a planet that says it's got a dozen moons that have been carved in the shape of some unknown arthropodal alien race that there's no other sign of anywhere in the galaxy except for these like moons that have been carved into Easter Island style in their likenesses. And this is not stuff we see. You don't see those moons, but you just read about it in those text boxes. But I'm still like, those text boxes are giving me a lot of flavor. I don't know.
No, they're good. There's no question.
I'm a sucker for that stuff.
It's when you read about the different the hydrogen breakdown in the air of the planets, I'm kind of just like, I'm not going to retain this. I'm not going to. It's not going to affect me.
Yeah, there's okay. The chemical composition paragraph I skip. I mean, I say paragraph. It's usually 2 sentences, but I just skip over to see like, is this the one that's got the gas giant with a bunch of mysterious crypts built in underneath its atmosphere of an alien race that no one's identified yet?
They all are neat little Harlan Ellison short stories. Well, a lot of them are. Yeah, and that's fun, obviously. I mean, that's one of the charms of a lot of these video games and these big RPGs is when you just find these little missable content stories, mostly they're horror stories, mostly they're upsetting,
Yes,
Mass Effect, certainly. Fallout, very much like that. Big part of my experience of Fallout is just is like, what happened in this vault? Bad shit, it turns out. That's just part of it. We love our creepy horror stuff in video games, I guess. And
it's also, I love that in the context of space exploration. The idea that Mass Effect managed to get across, for as much as this is a kind of a fun time game where you just run around the galaxy, you shoot your way through the galaxy and win everywhere if you play it properly. Because of all this flavor text around, it gets across this idea that does affect the whole of the Mass Effect universe, how I view it, that space travel is actually really dangerous and goes wrong a majority of the time. Like a lot of these colonies have maybe a 50% batting average of succeeding. And that's a cool thing about the world. The most Harlan Ellison, I think, version of any of that stuff is totally missable content. You have to have a little trinket that you got from the consort back on the Citadel and do 1 or 2 other things. But then you can find a particular Prothean ruin where if you put that trinket into it, it's all done in the Dungeons and Dragons flavor text box, but it tells you a little Harlan Ellison short story about how Shepard conks out and sees this vision of a Cro-Magnon man on Earth that is accosted by a Prothean UFO and has an implant put in him where you can feel them like monitoring him. And then Shepard like lives through a whole life of a caveman, going back to his tribe and occasionally like seeing the Prothean thing show up to scan him again. And then he like comes back to life, like, or, comes back to consciousness around his, back on the ground of this planet with his companions looking over. And it's like, oh, you've been out for 10 seconds, but he got this whole glimpse into the,
oh God, it's like that Next
Chariots
Generation.
of the Gods past of humanity. Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah, there's a Star Trek Next Generation episode.
One of the best.
Does that.
Inner Light. Yeah, an incredible episode. All right, that's cool. I don't think I'd ever seen that in the game. How about that, man? I don't think I ever found the caveman Inner Light episode in Mass Effect. That's great. Really cool.
Yeah. It's very cool. It's the thing you kind of wish that, maybe in a later generation DLC, they would have actually like animated that in some form. But here it's just like, in the text box.
Do like a Cro-Magnon adventure story that took like 8-10 hours.
No, I'm not saying you would play through it, but I'm saying they could have done an animated cutscene, with just flashes of this, and sort of like the vision flashes maybe you get when you do the beacon or the conduit. Or there's a lot of Prothean like the conduit, the cipher, and the beacon. Well,
look, as we complain about stuff in the middle section of Mass Effect 1, one thing that is undeniable is that the writing is awesome. For them, like obviously when we're doing side missions that don't matter, that are missable content, it's not as awesome, but the important stuff is incredible. It's all fantastic. There are 2 major story missions, couple of little ones. The Liara one, are we counting that as a major story mission?
Well, I think, yeah. In terms of, they give you, when you leave the Citadel, they give you, say, here's your 3 leads. You can go to this planet, that planet, or this planet. Right. Actually, you can go to a few others if you want to do random stuff.
And we recommend going to this one. They give you do this first thing. Yeah.
The recommendation is go get Liara first.
Yeah.
And I think that's canonical. Although it's kind of cute if you leave her for last and it turns out she's been floating in this bubble for too long. She's like, her dialogue is that she's gone a little loopier.
Yep.
Neat. In
fun.
stasis. Neat. But also it's like kind of related to what we were talking about before. It's in terms of content. I have a really hard time. I had to force myself in my Renegade playthrough where I'm like, all right, I'm not going to romance Liara this time. So I'm going to leave her. I'm not going to go get her first. But that took like some real concerted effort to not go there
Of course. Liara is one of the best characters in the game. You're limiting your amount of Liara by leaving her. So yeah, I've never actually done that. We just watched it.
We talked about this a little bit. Me too. That we're talking about like who's the best side character in this game, and how I really don't think none of these characters are at their full apex here, except for maybe Rex. I think Rex gets the best character of this game.
Maybe. I think
Liara is.
I like Liara.
So you go meet her. She's the daughter of the Asari matriarch that Saren has recruited. Is sort of the secondary villain to Saren in this. And she is a archaeologist that specializes in the Protheans. So we went through last time. The Protheans are the galaxy-spanning civilization that disappeared 50,000 years earlier, and Shepard has learned was wiped out by the Reapers, who may be on their way back now. And so we're going to find her. She's the expert on these people, so we're going to find her. We have to do a big, long Mako drive. This is Mako stuff that I don't mind at all. Just driving through and blasting. Because it's not climbing up cliff faces.
Yeah, this is kind of some of your first Mako experiences. Just like okay, it's a car. I shoot things. It's fine. You're not used to climbing over jagged cliffs and shit yet.
Yeah, well, this is action oriented. You don't have to climb over anything. I said it's not the bad platforming stuff that bogs it down in other areas. And then you have to go through. She's down like in a mine type thing, a dig, and you have to fight your way through there. There's a bunch of death. This probably had like the boss fight that's the hardest of any in the game for me most of the time. Although in Legendary Edition, I didn't find it to be very hard, but I remember dying a lot on this mission in the original version.
It's kind of a checkpoint.
The big armature that you have to fight on foot.
Yeah. That moment is kind of like a skill check in the game. This is like, okay, let's see if you've figured out combat yet. Like here, you want to use your guys and you use their abilities and use your radials and all that stuff. It might be the hardest fight in the game, honestly, just because you're so early leveled at this point, usually.
Yeah, that's the thing that's always difficult with these two. When you get to to the open world part of a Bioware game, where you can choose your which of the main quest lines you want to do in what order. Whichever one you choose first is always going to be really difficult because you're under leveled. And that's probably going to be the hardest section of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they do some stuff maybe in later things of kind of level scaling the enemies to you, but that's always kind of a factor. And you probably want it to be a factor because I think most games you want there to be. Well, I don't know. Do you want the difficulty curve to be that it gets harder as it goes, or that it gets easier as it goes as you get more powerful?
I mean, I got to admit, I kind of like it getting easier as it goes. I kind of like it, just as a person kind of mastering the thing. I kind of like to have that feeling of just like, oh yes, I've trivialized these kind of battles now with my skills, and part of that is getting better at the game, and part of it is progression. But I find it less satisfying when I'm staying, when it's getting harder on me somehow. And sometimes that's just a skill issue. Sometimes, I played Diablo 4 a bit this summer, and they have a mechanic that is, it seems like it makes a lot of sense, which is that wherever you go will be leveled to you. Like you will always be battling, people within like 5 levels of you. And so the fights don't get harder or easier. They're always at the same place, no matter where you go, which sounds like, okay, well then, that'll work. No, it's terrible. There's no progression in the game.
It'll maintain the challenge level. But the worst version of something like that is you keep adding all these skills and levels to your character and you feel like you're getting worse.
Yeah, that's what it is.
At the game.
Or nothing's changing.
That's the worst thing.
Like it's not satisfying
you're running
at all.
In place.
You're not building, you're just sort of staying level. And if you didn't get better, it would be the same. I don't know if I'm ever going to finish that game. It was a disappointing game, to be honest. So yeah,
but you do want some difficulty spikes here and there to maintain some level of challenge in the end of the game. I'd say
for sure. Bosses are a great way to do that.
You find in this level we're talking about, you go down underground. You find Liara suspended in a stasis bubble that she did to sort of protect herself when the Geth attacked her site, because Saren told them to. And you save her and recruit her to your team, and she is then one of your main, romantic interests throughout the rest of the series.
Clearly the one they intend you to go with. Yes.
The romance that it feels like they put the most content into and around. But she's one of the characters that is not at her best in this. In this, they play up the adorkable, oh shucks, I'm so awkward.
Oh yeah, she's a total
scientist thing.
Zoe Deschanel character in this first game,
right?
But I like that though, because when she changes, it is a palpable change. Like when you catch up with her in the second game, you're like, oh, you've been up to some shit, and it's rewarding in that way. I think this is a very consistent, interesting characterization, actually. I really like Liara top to bottom. And part of that is sort of the wet behind the ears first game, Liara.
Yeah, it occurs to me as we've been doing our Shield episodes lately, and I keep banging a drum there about how much season 4 of the Shield is improved in hindsight by subsequent seasons.
Yeah.
Sort of knowing that they actually follow through on some stuff that you're not convinced they will. Maybe the initial time through. Mass Effect 1 functions like that a lot to me.
Oh yeah,
a lot of these characters are improved in hindsight so much that. Yeah, I mean, I think
all of them really. I mean, I think Rex. I think you're right. I think Rex actually is at his best in this first game.
Well, he's never again he's never a teammate again. You can encounter him in the next games, but you don't. He doesn't come with you anymore. But yeah, all the other aliens, that Liara, Garrus, Tali, I feel like really become so much better in 2 and 3.
Oh yeah,
and that carries back to how I view it when I'm talking to them this time. I'm like, I'm more into you now. Hearing Garrus grouse about his trouble at CSEC is still not my least interesting portion of his stuff, but I just have a lot more affection for him. So
yeah, knowing that he goes and becomes like intergalactic Omar Little from The Wire, in the very next game.
Yeah.
You know, like it gets you over a lot of the hump of him bitching about his job. Yeah.
Yeah, bitching about his job and how, like I was a cop and the thing about cops is that there's too many regulations, man. And they just red tape and I should be able to take down the bad guys however I want. Like there's some of that too in the Renegade Shepherd path, that this is a 2007 game. There's still like a lot more of that. Well, we talked about the Shield. That's the same era. And it's the Jack Bauer era of the War on Terror.
You're right.
And there's this attitude that like, yeah, but if you're not like torturing some innocent people and blowing up some churches that you don't have to, like, are you even really trying to fight the bad guys? Like that was more of an attitude then. And now, like, again, 2023, our attitude towards the police, it has shifted somewhat, to put it mildly. And hearing him complain about the rules and how he wasn't allowed to shoot down this ship over like a crowded neighborhood of the Citadel wards, because it had a bad guy in it. It's like, yeah, man. Like,
yep.
Did they not like have an academy that you went to? They're not teaching like what?
Yeah,
I don't know. But
well, no,
he very much wants to be the Punisher.
Yeah,
he gets better. You can influence him. You can encourage him to be the Punisher.
Imagine him having the stupid like Blue Lives Matter Punisher logo on his heads up device or whatever. You get like special armor.
Like more like you could get Blue Lives Matter gear for him, but no, actually you couldn't, because he's not like the cops that do the Punisher logo. He's really kind of like the Punisher, and that he's not too fond of cops.
I'm tired of being a cop. I'd much rather be the Punisher. Yeah, that is true.
But we're drifting into future games.
Right.
So the other thing about Liara is that because she's an Asari, they have some like Vulcan mind meld powers, so they can unlock certain plot events by doing a Vulcan mind meld with you.
Well, yeah, the Asari, they are the sensual alien race, of course. So, it makes sense.
They are.
Yeah.
That's some of my least favorite stuff in this game, actually. I feel in terms of the plotting. Like overall, we keep talking about the dynamic here is that that I think will be reversed in Mass Effect 2 is that for Mass Effect 1, generally the overarching plot stuff is really well written, and the side quest content is not that well written.
Yeah.
And in Mass Effect 2, the side quests are extraordinarily well written, I think, like the best of any game I can think of off the top of my head. And then there's some stuff in the main like through line narrative of that game that I'm like, yeah, that's kind of clunky. That's kind of like paint by numbers fantasy stuff, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
The other big quest lines are you can then go to Noveria to chase down Liara's mother, or you can go to Theros, where there's a Geth attack going on. And
on a colony.
I don't remember exactly why they think that one's going to be so important to send you there, but I guess just that the Geth are involved.
Right. And they were on Eden Prime, so yeah.
Yeah. It feels like this is another thing where I'm like trying to game out. Like if I'm trying to role play this as to what the story has told me, like that going after Liara's mother, Benezia, is probably the bigger priority. But because of that, like the dramatist in me is like, well, I should go do the other one first and then save that big confrontation for the season finale, right?
Yeah, I think Theros going first is just better for the build. I think that's generally how I do it, just because, yeah, exactly. Noveria is better as a sequence. It kind of,
it's the best of the three.
Ramps up more, so yeah, I kind of go, my ideal order is go pick up Liara, do the Theros sequence, and then Noveria, which is some of the best part of this game, really. So,
Yeah.
So that's my order.
So let's go to Theros next.
Yeah.
Theros, sort of the cool thing about Theros is as a planet, it's a new colony, but it is built. It was a Prothean colony from 50,000 years ago, and so the new like human colony that's there is just built into existing like ruined skyscrapers that the Protheans left behind.
Yeah, it's cool.
Despite the fact the Protheans, the thing about them generally is that they didn't leave behind much of almost any trace for a galaxy-spanning civilization. Their shit should be everywhere. But there's not a whole lot other than the mass relays and the Citadel, which are obviously the backbone of intergalactic civilization here, which we'll talk about more in the third act. But in this case, so you land at these big, like abandoned skyscrapers that have a few human colonists running around in it. and they're acting weird. Like they've been attacked by the Geth, so they're in siege mode, sort of hold up, but also they're acting squirrely in a different way that's kind of hard to put your finger on. You find out through fighting your way through all the Geth that it's because there is a unique form of like plant-based creature, an alien life that had never been encountered before, that the human corporation was sort of experimenting with. And this giant plant called the Thorian, I mean, they call it a plant-based creature. It looks like a big, gloopy, organic, exposed organ. But it has spores that it puts out that lets it mind control organic creatures to sort of act as its thralls and do its bidding.
It's an ancient thing, an ancient creature that has lived for centuries and controls humans or all living things. Ultimately, this has a lot to do with sort of the mind control properties of the Reapers, right? That's why they're interested in this planet, right?
That's what I thought going back into this. Yeah, that was I was trying to remember why. It must have something to do with indoctrination, because we're going to get into Reaper indoctrination more, I guess, as we go on. But actually, it seems to be the thing as I was going through it this time, because I was trying to be like, what is the deal here? It's that the Thorian creature is millennia old and will hibernate for thousands of years at a time.
Yeah, it's lived through these things before, these mass extinctions.
Yes. So it hibernated through the Prothean extinction.
Yeah.
And so it has a connection, and it can call it, sort of genetic memory of it had encountered the Protheans. It knows their deal. But the Reapers on their last round of wiping out the galaxy missed the Thorian, basically, because it was in hibernation. And so that seems to be the thing. They're looking, Saren came here and sent the Geth here to try and extract some sort of information about the Protheans from the Thorian, which is still sort of mysterious to us at this time. We don't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing here with, there is an Asari commando that was one of Saren's goons that Saren gave to the Thorian as its slave in exchange for giving him this Prothean information. And the Thorian will spit out clones of this Asari that during the big boss fight, you have to keep killing it over and over again as it spits out clones.
Yeah. Boring boss fight.
And then, and then one of them at the end, once you kill the thing, she talks to you like, "Oh, I'm free of my mind control. I can tell you this." Well, and she gives you some bit of does another Vulcan mind meld with you that unlocks a little bit more of your Prothean vision that you got from the beacon, but not enough to actually do anything with at this point. So you can do that. You can either save the colony by using humane knockout gas on the Thorian slaves, or you can just shoot your way through them. Yeah. One of the most unmotivated bits of assholery, but it's not really any easier to shoot through them. And Shepard's a real prick about it. If you ever, as I was doing in one of my things, trying to choose the renegade path very pointedly, just nah, we don't have time. We're not wasting time on these people. Just shoot them all.
No time. Yeah, that's a good one. It's
not even desperate no time. It's just we're not wasting time is how he puts it. Just really prickish.
I mean, that is the only reason to do that, though. That's just to be a prick, essentially. That's the problem with a lot of those. This is your basic RPG quest kind of stuff. I've probably played a lot of similar situations where oh, this town has clearly got a secret. Oh, it turns out it's all mind controlled. I think I've played versions of this in other games. I feel like there's certainly been a Dragon Age quest very similar to this at some point.
Oh yeah, there must be.
Yeah, I mean, most games have a version of
at least one of them.
Big RPGs, it's just a natural thing to do with your mechanics. There's a lot more Mako here. There's some good stuff in the old Prothean base that I like a lot in this section, talking to old AIs. Yeah, all that's fun.
We get different level layouts, which is nice.
Yes. There are factions. There's the corporation, that is working separate from the colonists, and they're well, actually, the colonists are sort of we sort of put them there as bait. They're sort of we're test subjects.
Oh, it's very alien.
Yeah, exactly. And so all that's fun. Like, it is more complicated and a little more considered and thought out than just the bog standard version of this. And games coming out later will do a less interesting version of this, probably. And whatever Dragon Age thing that we can't place right now probably was less interesting. It's good. It's good. It introduces ideas. Sorry.
Yeah. There's the village of Haven in Dragon Age, right? That turns out to be the dragon cult. It's not exactly mind control there, but it is everybody like acting kind of squirrely.
That could be what I'm thinking.
Or maybe it's the...
I mean, there's a few now that I think about it. Like
the point thing is, it's easy. Yeah, the place where you get shale too is a little like that, but it's easy to crap out that type of quest line. You're right for an RPG. If it's not doing that, are you even trying? But what is a better, more involved quest line that feels more unique to Mass Effect, more cinematic? I mean, the nice cinematic part about Theros, I think, is the way the Geth attack ship is attached to the side of the skyscraper.
Yeah, there's neat stuff.
You have to, knock out the legs.
Of course, yeah.
Just
that's
some
cool.
cool cinematic there. But what is more cinematic and what feels like playing through an episode of a TV series that's got more plot and guest stars is the Noveria quest line.
Yeah, it's great.
So Noveria is a world that is sort of I don't know if it's libertarian exactly, but it's
a place for corporations to do their shit without laws, basically.
Yeah, it's international waters.
Yeah,
where corporations set up labs to do things that would not be legal in Citadel space proper. And you can probably guess how some of that goes. When you land there, you can go through some corporate intrigue. You helping an internal affairs person expose the corrupt manager there, or you can just work with the manager and get your pass to go to the labs.
I really like all that stuff, actually. I think all that's really fun. Yeah, I'm
blowing past it because it's ultimately the minutia of it doesn't matter that much, and we've been going for an hour already.
Yeah, I understand.
It actually is. It's some of the better. It's got full voice acting to everything. That there's intrigue back and forth that you can spend some time on.
Yeah,
and it's pretty good stuff.
People decide what side you're on, who you want to help. Am I going to help this guy? He's not really on either side. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. It's fun. It's fun. Spy shit.
You can get the Solarian corrupt frog man hauled off in cuffs.
That's the best.
Behind his desk, which is fun.
That's so much fun. Yeah.
But it's all in service of just getting you back in the Mako to drive to this isolated, lab facility that's on a snowy mountain where Matriarch Benezia has holed up. And when you get there, so I guess if I'm being critical of this, there's some similarities between Noveria and Theros, because you get there and the surviving members of the lab are locked down in sort of siege mode, like they are on Theros, and there's a mind control element that we'll get to. Not of those people though, but they say that there was a disaster in the labs, and these aliens, the Rachni, that are sort of the bug aliens, they present more as xenomorphs, have got out. And then Benezia brought a bunch of Geth there and are down there too. And so the survivors labs are kind of like, we don't know what the hell is going on at this point. We kind of hoped she was coming to help us, but she wasn't. And so you're fighting your way through the bugs to get to her, basically.
Yeah. And the Rachni, of course, are a long thought extinct species of psychic bugs that were killed off of the Krogan Wars from a couple hundred years ago, for that whole thing that led to the Genophage, of course. But turns out, psychic bugs, bad. They don't want them around. They take over the entire world if they're left to flourish. So we thought they were extinct. They're not. They found some more.
That's the idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But
they, this is long. Actually, this is all related to stuff that happened before humanity, before found the rest of these the Citadel civilizations. That the other races had this big war with the Rachni. I don't know, it's 1,000 or 2,000 years prior, and it was genuinely a threat to all other organic civilization until they brought the Krogan into the mix, and that's
they raised up the Krogan, raised them up from being non spaceflight species, because they would be better fought. Yeah, we're getting excited about the lore here, but yeah.
Well, the cool lore about the Rachni that is really deep in there that I found is that the Arachni themselves were bugs, so they were not spacefaring until the Solarians came along, and they like did their sort of like mind meld, but goopier tentacle based mind meld, whatever. But they sort of scavenged the technology for space flight from attacking the Solarians. It's like if the xenomorphs learned to build their own spaceships by assimilating us, and then launch actual spaceships to attack human space. That may be the plot of Alien Covenant. I still haven't seen it.
It's kind of.
It is okay.
I mean, it's a familiar. It's tropey stuff. It's all tropey stuff, especially in this first game. Versions of these, are just ideas people have had in the arena of science fiction. There's like we say in Harlan Ellison or Star Trek. There's a lot of versions of these things. They're kind of hopping around. This one has enough definition and individuality to stand up as not just a blatant ripoff though. There's thought put into this, and you can really see it now. I think in Novaria, they're really giving consideration to how a galactic society would work. Of course, there'd be a corporate haven for evil experiments. Of course, there'd be psychic bugs out there, and that would be a problem. It's really embracing the potential of their world here. What they can do with pulp sci-fi.
So I guess before we can talk, we as Shepard talk to the Arachni Queen, which we find we find Benezia messing with the Arachni Queen, who's locked in a tank, and you do the Benezia boss fight. This one can also be, I think this is second most difficult fight in the game, probably.
It's a little hard, yeah.
It can be a little more difficult, but once you get to her, she, once you knock down her health to a certain level, you free her from the mind control she's been under, and this is the most like high fantasy element of it so far. It feels like, but she basically says like Saren kind of brainwashed her into following her, that she thought she could resist it, but did not. But now that she's farther away from him and has been shot a few times, I guess she can shake it off for a while. And I believe this is where she explains that the whole. Well, wait, no, I don't know if we got in there yet. Anyway, it introduces the idea of indoctrination, that Saren is brainwashing all of his followers, and that includes basically she and her followers that she had before, and that there's something, if not magical, unknown, sci-fi juju going on that allows there to be a mind control element going on here.
Yeah, well, that's part of why they're interested in the Arachni, because their mind control abilities, and the Thorian back on Theros. It's like it.
But this is again. I thought all of this was about mind control, but it turns out it's not. It's about Prothean stuff. That what they want to get from the Arachni Queen is it's because the Arachni Queens have some juju where they have genetic memory, and this one surviving egg that the corporation found floating in a spaceship can remember stuff from 1,000 years ago,
genetic
2,000
memory.
years ago, and 50,000 years ago. Genetic memory. And what they want to find there is the location of this lost Mass Effect relay that Saren is what Saren's trying to chase down here. And that's why he's trying to get information on Protheans. The Protheans somehow managed to, I don't know what they did. That there was some mass relay that was launched out of its system. Or maybe it wasn't even the Protheans did it. It was not just a supernova blew it out of its orbit. And then once it's in the middle of space, mass relays they make a point about saying they're like cold in the way they run. So they're harder to find on scanners. And so this thing is really just a needle in a haystack out in the middle of nowhere. And Saren thinks it's really important to find it for some reason.
Yeah.
And that it turns out, again, I thought exactly what you're saying, that this must all revolve around mind control.
It does, though. It does all revolve around mind control.
Well, it does, but the information they're looking for, they're not like trying to use the Arachni to improve their mind control abilities. They're trying to use the mind control or mind melding abilities to get pry information out of the Arachni or the Thorian from 50,000 years ago to try and track down this lost mass relay.
Isn't there like
that's part of the plot? I didn't remember that much.
Isn't there something like Saren's Saren's kind of running his own game a little bit too. That we can't really talk about that yet. But isn't there part of it? Is him trying to like master the indoctrination protocols or something like that? Okay, that's
We're
for
going to
next
get
time.
into him
That's
and more on Vermeer, where the next planet we go to, where we actually confront Saren.
We'll actually talk about the villain of the game in the last third of this thing. Yeah, because he's not
indoctrination,
really present until then.
which that's true. He's not a very present villain. Even Benezia, you think that the point of having a secondary villain like Benezia would be that that's somebody you can clash with a few times throughout the game without having to nerf the boss down. But no, you encounter her once. I mean, there's something, I guess, respectable about that is a cinematic conceit that Shepard doesn't really have a lot of ongoing enemies that he just fights to a draw over and over again, season after season.
We'll get there. We'll get Kai Lung.
We'll get there eventually.
The great,
but in this game,
no, right.
Shepard has a confrontation with an enemy. He resolves it.
I don't think that you had to avoid that. I think that the pulp nature of this thing allows for recurring villains and nemesises and such. But yeah, I mean, I guess you don't need it either.
Well, but I guess it's also a way of it's respecting the sort of like renegade, paragon, whatever thing. If you want to play as renegade, that means you
kill
don't
that guy.
Spare your enemies when you have them on the ropes.
Well, fair enough.
You kill Benezia.
You can come up with something.
And I guess so. This is the big paragon renegade decision here is after Benezia dies either way, whether you're nice to her or not. And then you talk to the Rachni Queen. The Rachni Queen mind controls a dead body to like zombify them to speak to you, which is very reminiscent to the Thorian. Again, like they're a little similar.
Yes, it is.
But the Rachni Queen basically says like, yeah, we're not that bad. Like you guys did a lot of the attacking of us. You guys wiped us out. Like, and look, I know you've been attacked by a lot of feral Rachni during this quest line, but that's because the evil company separated them from their mother, and so they went insane, and they cannot be helped. So you have my blessing to go kill all of those children of mine, but let me go, or else you're going to wipe out my race all over again.
Genocide. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are. I mean, I think my initial playthrough 15 years ago, I was playing pretty much as a Paragon, but I was like, I don't know if I'm not gonna risk this one.
Mm-hmm.
You are space bugs that marionette puppet dead bodies, and none of that sits well with me. So I think even as a Paragon, I killed her, but they do a pretty good job of writing it. That they talk about the Rachni communicate through songs, and like, will you silence my song forever?
The thought put into these things is incredible, of course, like everything in this game. Like the actual writing of these creatures and or these scenarios is really quite strong right away. Like this is what's special about this game, obviously, from the beginning. Stuff like the Rachni choice, it is, and again, it's another one that does not comport to Paragon Renegade very well. Like you're saying, like you can be a Paragon and think like, yeah, we can't have this psychic space bugs running around that almost took over the galaxy last time. So I mean, yeah, you're making the hard choice for the good of all humanity at that point. All not just humanity, all races, all sentient beings in the Milky Way. So it is kind of like another place that Paragon Renegade is a bit of a crutch, but it's also like them not allowing that to get in the way of good writing, them not allowing that to limit what the game can be. It lets you have that conversation with the Rachni. It lets you do pluses and minuses without forcing it into this binary choice mode. I mean, it does, but you can ignore that.
Yeah, and it's not.
It didn't fuck up your Paragon Renegade run playthrough to do that, right? Like you just we're right back to having a high blue line and passing all your persuade checks.
Yeah, I lost a few points, but and none of my allies turned against me on that. Your allies will not that's a mechanic they'll play with more in Dragon Age than Mass Effect overall. That you can't keep everybody happy all the time, and you can drive your companions to actually just abandon you or attack you, even in some of the Dragon Age games, if you choose things that are completely antithetical to their morality. In this one, your crew will go along with whatever you choose. They have a dynamic where you run around with two teammates at all times that you choose, and there will always be like a angel and devil on your shoulder whenever there's one of these choices pops up. And they haven't. I didn't notice, like, for as much as we talked about, we've mapped out the contours of this system and know like where all the things are. I didn't know until watching a YouTube video yesterday that there's a whole mechanic under the hood of Mass Effect 1 where it tracks the morality of all of your squad mates, and through your interactions with them, you can move them sort of up and down the scale.
Oh, like in Knights too, right? Interesting.
Yeah, Knights. Well, you see it happening in Knights of the Old Republic too, and here it's completely under the hood, which is kind of cool.
To the point where it's almost not noticeable. I mean, I remember turning
organic,
Garrus,
however you want to say it. Yeah,
I remember making Garrus a little bit more of a hard ass in this first game. Kind of like, well, maybe that teaches us something about regulations. All that stuff I remember doing. Yeah. So I guess that the meters would be there. I wonder if those carry over.
But be like a rate. Depending on how you. What's interesting about this to me is because you wouldn't say that this is a game where like your companions' outcomes vary drastically based on
not at all
what you do with them. Not the way it is in other Bioware games.
There's a few that can live or die based on individual choices, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not like, Knights of the Old Republic 2, like I said, you can turn some of your companions into full-blown Jedi that will carry on, that will rebuild the Jedi Order, or full-blown Sith.
Make Goto a Jedi if you want. See if you can make it happen. Yeah, it's there. Actually, I don't know if you can do that, but
or Dragon Age, you can decapitate some. But look, but in this case, there's just this internal thing where it will clock, depending on how you've influenced your companions, they can move up and down this scale. So like, it'll start off with Caden is the most Paragon and Rex is the most Renegade. But you can get to a point where if you've influenced Garrus enough, he's dropped down the scale to be more Renegade, and maybe you've influenced Rex to be a little nicer. And then depending on how you've done that, you could have the same two guys there, and one of them will be the angel on your shoulder for killing the Rachni, and he can be the devil on your shoulder in the other one.
Yeah,
in the other version.
That's cool.
It's odd.
That's cool. And that seems like getting towards where they're a place they end up later. Maybe evolutionary steps towards the ultimate versions of these games. Yeah.
But it raises a question about that of, is the better system like what they've gotten to later on, that like in the Dragon Age games, and I feel like other Telltale games will do this, where they will clock for you on the screen. A little thing will pop up that says like Garrus liked this.
Yeah, I always like that.
Or so whatever, Rex slightly disapproves, or Liara greatly approves, versus having it completely under the hood. And it just, there's an argument that makes it more, organic, cinematic, whatever, that things just happen. And that's a better, more refined way of doing it. But also, as video game players, do you want the feedback to know that, do you want constant like reassurance that your decisions are having effects, like even if they're tinkering under the hood?
I do like that. I think it keeps you conscious of, hey, watch what you say. The children are listening, kind of thing. I appreciate that whenever it is included in a game. Now, I mean, I'm sure it could be abused or overused or whatever, but certainly in a Telltale game, which are not the most active games when it comes to actually playing, I like having at least the illusion of importance on, the choices I make, because that is literally the entire game, is the choices. And that's true of Bioware as well. I kind of feel it happening in this. It doesn't have the on-screen pop-ups, but I have noticed, that narratives go a certain way, just like not little narratives, like little internecine conversations you have on the ship will start to, go a certain way based on what you've done. Like Garrus will ask you about what you did on a planet and be like, well, I figured that was the way to go. And he's like, that's interesting. I'm going to change my character a little bit based on that. You'll have those moments. So yeah, I think it's all good. And this is another thing that makes this game feel fluid and living, even if it is on rails. The illusion of kind of, you have massive control over the flow of this thing. Because honestly, that's all that matters, is that it feels that way. It doesn't actually have to be that way. If it feels that way, that's enough. And in fact, it probably makes it a little easier to create a cinematic experience if it is on rails. This was all we talked about last time. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, there's certainly a clumsy way and an elegant way to implement it in both directions, I suppose. And I think the ideal for me, especially for something like Mass Effect, where I keep coming back to the word cinematic because I feel like that is the goal here, is to make it feel like a cinematic experience that you're playing through with, the shooting or whatever. And there, I think it's good. The ideal is that you want to know that those decisions are having some effect under the hood, but you don't necessarily want to know the exact mechanics of it, because we can dissect the frog too much, like we've been talking about. And now I know I just need to get to this threshold. Mass Effect 3, has its war asset system where it's just a point value.
Bummer.
And seeing those point values gets to be a little too mechanical. And when it's at its best, it's more organic, and that things you did earlier are playing into how things are playing out now, but you don't know every in and out of how 3 different decisions or ratings or point systems factored into that.
Well, there is the loyalty system in the second game. We'll talk about that soon enough.
Yeah, it's pretty binary on off switch. That's.
But yeah, I mean, it's all under the hood in this first game, to the point where you can miss it entirely, not be aware of it, because it doesn't have an effect on the outcome of this game.
Right.
All right. Well, that's
it can we'll get into next. The one big way it can is we'll get into next time.
Of course,
we're going to go to Vermeer next.
Vermeer, the next thing we're going to talk about. Next time we come back and talk about Mass Effect, we're going to start with Vermeer, which is where I think Mass Effect really becomes Mass Effect. And then the rest of the game, which is pretty great too. That's for next time. And we're also going to talk about the how we would start a big part of this. How we would adapt this to TV, which I know you have ideas about. I sure do. And that'll be
I've got quite a few, but it's harder. This one is harder than I thought, for reasons we'll get into.
Well, okay, we'll talk about it, and that's next time. Anything else for this? I think not. I think we're good. Thank you for listening to us ramble at length about Mass Effect. We've been looking forward to this for a while. We're going to indulge, so I appreciate you being there with us. All right, so next time, Al, Vermeer, and the final battle of the Citadel and Sovereign. It's all there. Okay.
Oh God, I can't wait to talk about Sovereign.
Yeah, that's next time too. Great.